Hi, I'm Coach Michael Burt. To get a free copy of my book, Inside the Mind of a Monster, text 678-506-7543. Text to get a copy of my book, Inside the Mind of a Monster, and I'm going to turn you into a legendary creature. Of leaving your amateur desires behind and making a decision to go pro, right? And last night I was sitting there making notes on your book, and I got a series of questions to ask you about the difference between an amateur and a professional. But I want to start by just telling a little bit of your story about how did you end up being the performance coach for the New York Yankees? Because that's a coveted position where you got to work under some of the best people in the world with some of the best people in the world. Just tell the people that are watching that story.
Yeah, well, I start like this. I say I was an underperforming player that relied heavily on coaching. So I had the desire, like every other kid in the New York area, man. I was a young baseball player. I was excited to play the game. I played hard. I trained hard. I did all the things that you were supposed to do as a player. But, I had the opportunity to play in college. I played at a D2 school up in New York. And, there was a point where I said, you know what, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to get to the warm weather. And I'm willing to take a shot on myself. And, I came down to the University of South Florida, and I knew that I'd have to try to walk onto the team. And I got down to campus, and the coach says, hey, it's great that you want to walk on, but we don't have open tryouts here. So I got humbled very quickly. But I always loved training for the game. I always loved the performance out. I love to push myself, love to challenge myself both physically and mentally. And with that, I decided to pursue a degree in sports medicine. And that's exactly what I did. So I got to campus and I said, all right, I'm going to go to school for this. And well, now I got to start learning what this is and how it works. So what I did was I went over to the strength and conditioning facility. I introduced myself to the head coach over there. And he said, listen, if you want to come and help me out, I'd be happy to have you. But, we're going to have early mornings and we're going to have late nights. You're going to do all the things that I don't want to do. You're going to paint the weights when they get, chipped. You're going to clean the weight room when it's filled with sweat and it stinks. And that's what you're going to have to do. Are you down for that? And I said, yeah, of course. So that's sort of how my journey started there. But, come spring training, which starts in February down in Tampa, I caught wind, obviously, that the Yankees were coming to town. So I drove my old beat-up hoopty car up to that stadium. I parked about 1.5 miles away because I couldn't afford to park any closer. I walk up, and like every other fan that's there, I'm staring through the chain link fence with my old Sprint flip phone, taking pictures, sending it home to my friends and family up in New York. And I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. There's Jeter, there's Posada, there's Rivera, all these stud players. And literally that day I went back to my internship. I met with the head coach. He called me in his office and said, hey, I want to talk to you. And usually where I come from in New York, when somebody wants to talk to you, they're about to whack you and tell you, hey, you're done here. But he said, listen, I got an opportunity for you. And the head strength coach with the Yankees called. He's looking for someone to hand out towels, clean the weight room, and hand out waters. Would you have any interest in that? And I said, you know what? As a matter of fact, I just got back from there, and I would love that opportunity. When do I start? And he says, well, you start tomorrow. So took the trip back. This time I had a spot up front. I walk in the main office. They say, are you Dana Cavalier? I said, yep. She threw a credential around my neck with a C for clubhouse access, F for field access. They walked me in the clubhouse, threw me in Yankee gear. Next thing you know, that same field that I was taking pictures of a day earlier, I'm now in the middle of for team stretch. And it was a really radical 24 hours. But I knew at that point my life was going to change if I did the little things right.
So the lesson you would tell people about that, because these most successful people have a series of actions, right? Mm-hmm. Like me coaching junior pro basketball at 15, taking a chance being like there was a series of things that kind of lead to the big times. And for you ended up being the performance coach for the Yankees. But it all started with these series of actions. You showed up, you took the picture, you got in there. What advice would you give people out there that are sitting out there today, Dana, and they're saying, nobody's taking action on anything. There's no need to do this. It won't work. Like, what would be your piece of advice? Because you just never know. Your story,
Yeah.
you just never know what's going to happen if you take action.
You got to take a chance on yourself. You know, A-Rod's a good friend of mine, and he said, listen, I don't bet on horses, I bet on jockeys. And I think a lot of people out there, they don't bet on themselves. And they're looking for this perfect picture. You know, entrepreneurship today is depicted as this sort of beautiful, reward-filled opportunity, which it is. But it is ugly, it's dirty, you got to be gritty. You're going to get told no. You're going to feel defeated at times. But when somebody tells you no, when you feel defeated, are you going to be like one of those old punching bags back in the 80s that we know about that goes down and comes back up again? And you have to, because that's the only way to get where it is that you want to go. And also, if you're not one of those people, you got to get out of the game. It's not for you.
Yep.
It's a competitive game out there, no matter what you want to do. I was doing this at 19. And that story I just told, I was 19 years old. I was a kid with a dream, but I lost my dream before that. Remember, I said I wanted to be a player for the New York Yankees.
Right.
I had to pivot at 19 and say, you're not playing anymore. What can you do next? And I found the fastest way to the big leagues. I was the director of performance for the Yankees, head strength coach at 23 years old, telling these multi-millionaires that had more money than I could dream of what to do. Meanwhile, I'm stealing Metrex and EAS shake powder out of the clubhouse so I could eat dinner that night.
Yeah.
And that was my reality, but it was ugly. I had the crappiest shoes on the team until I got a free pair, and I just kept showing up. And that's the key. You got to just keep showing up.
Yeah, and the value is showing up is half the battle. I think a lot of people just don't understand. Showing up, working the muscle, taking the action, uncovering the rock, making the connection, you know, and so let's talk a little bit about, you work with athletes at the highest level. So I got a series of questions about going pro. All right. Now the first one is the preparation of a pro, you know, because you talk about in your book what the lifestyle of the pro is, right? The schedule of when they come in and how long they go, and then they got to play the game, and then they go home and go to sleep, and then they do this. Like, I want you to give the viewers out there who are watching this, I'm talking about the top pros. What was the preparation of the top people?
Yeah, well, you know, the interesting thing is most people think a game starts at 7 and it ends at 10. I think a lot of people believe you get to the stadium at 6:30 and you're leaving by 10:30, you know, and it doesn't work that way. You know, we would get to the stadium at between 12:30 and 1 o'clock for a 7 o'clock game, and we'd be leaving the stadium between 11 and midnight. Yeah. So usually after the game ends, you're leaving anywhere between 90 minutes and 2 hours after the game, because again, it is a lot of prep work. I'm telling you, we have 6 hours of preparation prior to the first pitch. Now, most people say, wow, but the players are going to be so tired if we do that. We got to go easy on them. And these guys, we built a schedule that was very regimented, because the one thing we knew is that people need, and they actually love, structure. You got people that say, I don't like structure. I don't like that. Trust me, you like, love, and need structure. And that's how it worked for us. So guys would get to the ballpark, they'd immediately change into their training clothes. They'd go into the training room, they'd get treatment if they needed it. Some guys would hit the hot tanks to loosen up, boom, right into the training facility with me. We'd put them through their physical preparation, rehabilitation if needed. And then from there, they'd get in their game, batting practice uni. They'd go down, they'd take some flips, they'd hit off the tee, they'd do all that, the skill prep work. And then we have team stretch at 4:20. Okay. We do that for 25 minutes every day. We stretch every day. We got people that can't even stretch after a workout today, but they do it every day. And then they throw, they take infield, they take outfield, then they eat, and then they get ready for the game. Back on the field, more sprints, more stretching, and do it again. And what's great about that is if you get that routine right, man, it compounds day after day after day. So good habits and good routines, when performed day in and day out, that's how you better your performance. So you asked me about pros. Pros realize it's never about a singular event that's going to make them great. They look at greatness over time. They say, what I do Monday, I do Tuesday, I do Wednesday, I do Thursday. And you could attest to this as much as I can. You meet people in the general population, they want variety. They like to do things different. Oh, I don't like to do the same workout Monday that I did on or Tuesday that I did on Monday, or that variety is something that I did not see high performers engage in. It was not about variety. It was about what works.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because people ask me, you know, of course, I've been coaching business people now for 12 or 13 years. And sometimes they say, when are you going to teach us something new? You know, and I'm like, look, when you are executing what you already been taught, this is not about entertainment. This is about repetition. This is about muscle memory. And this ain't going to be sexy. And I'm so glad you said that the big time people understand this is not about variety. Like, let's be entertained. Let's have something new every day. It's about mastery, right? It's about working a muscle to the point that it becomes muscle memory. There's, you know, like if you have to think about it, it's a liability. Like, it's so ingrained in you. And so many business people don't get this concept. They're like, well, I heard him talk about that last week. Well, yeah, but you hadn't done anything with it. So let's talk about something you said, that because I talk a lot about the body, the mind, the heart, the spirit, the 4 parts of a person's nature, the knowledge, the skill, the desire, the confidence. Let's talk about the mental training of these people, the toughness of professionals. How do they, because we know there's physical skill, right? And you worked on the physical, the body, the skill, but we also know that there's other parts to going pro. The mental toughness of it, the emotional toughness of it, the confidence piece of it. How does those parts get fed at that level? That's part of what it is.
Yeah, well, we look at the physical as a way of strengthening the mental, right? I always tell my players, and I'll tell you, and I'll tell everybody listening, after you train and after you work out, and I know you're on a fitness journey yourself, you know, you feel really good about yourself. Your confidence is peaked. After you get done training, you sweat, you're feeling really good about yourself. You look in the mirror a little bit differently, you're feeling great about yourself. What does it take to be successful when you're in a sport that's me versus you, or you're in a business negotiation, or you're in transaction where you have to be peak? And that's what we focused on with our athletes. A saying that I have is energy wins. You may be smarter than me, but if I got more energy than you and I can compete longer and harder, I have a really good chance of beating you when your energy dips. So we trained our athletes' physicality in order to strengthen their mentality so they could compete day in and day out at the highest possible level.
Now, did they have, I don't know, sports psychologists? I know that, you know, I do work with Kevin Elko, who's a sports psychologist. I've done work with, you know, Grover, who wrote Relentless. That was, you know, work with Jordan and Kobe Bryant and those players. Do they have mental training as far as physical training? So, or how does that work?
Yeah. So, you know, we definitely have a mental conditioning side, and the mental conditioning side it sort of spokes out into 2 prongs. And one is, you know, if you're feeling down about yourself, there's an element of watching, you know, visuals like video of you performing at your highest level. So you could actually see that, hey, I have been a high performer before. I may not remember it in this moment, but yes, that's true. That's me. So that's a big part of it. And then also helping them work through sort of the limiting beliefs and thoughts that they possess that sort of hijack their performance. It's like in your sport, if you're sitting at a foul line and you're thinking about not making the shot, right, or you're sitting at a business negotiation and there's people that shouldn't even walk in the room because they took themselves out of it on the drive to the meeting. Yeah. So we work on people seeing themselves as champions. Yeah. And anything that we could do, from what you put in your mouth to how you train to how you think, it all has to be aligned in one direction. And that's the direction of you being, playing, and executing like a champion day in and day out.
So the biggest separator between the people who are in the minor leagues and the people in the major leagues, you would say, let's just look at it this way. Is it talent? Is it mindset? Is it confidence? Is it coachability? What would you say the separators are?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of all of those things, to be quite honest with you. I think it's a combination of all of those things. And what I found with the lower level talent, and again, we're talking about pro athletes, so they're all talented, but there are differentiations amongst the talent set, even at the highest level. With those minor league guys, they were constantly searching. So if something new comes out, boom, they bounce to that. If there's a new book, if there's a new method, if there's a new technique, they're so focused on grabbing these things. And that tells you right there that they're not trusting themselves. Whereas a guy like Derek Jeter comes in, he knows exactly what he's got to do. He has built a routine that works for him, that's proprietary to him. He's not copying what A-Rod's doing or anybody else. He's doing what he has found to work well for him, and he's doing it with intensity and consistency day in and day out. Now, here's the other thing. You know, I was brought up at a time where it was like, hey, if you're not working, somebody else is, and they're going to beat you. And when I watched these guys at the highest level, they didn't work like that. Actually, they had a schedule, and success in life and performance, it was all a scheduled event. Their training was all scheduled. So a guy like Derek Jeter wouldn't be there at 1 o'clock. He'd be there at 2:30, and boom, right when he got there, there was no downtime. It was work, 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 work. Game ended, shower, do what he has to do, and he's gone. There was no wasted time. He couldn't afford to waste the time. Yeah. The young players, they'd sit on the couch, they'd lounge out, you know, they'd come for a free lunch, you know, things like that. Those behavior sets were very amateur, and it was easy to see when you've been working around pros for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. I love that concept. It ties into going pro, man. You leave your amateur desires behind. What do the pros do? All right, here's a question. You know, I'm big into prey drive. I'm writing a book on this right now on activators of prey drive. Prey drive is prevalent in animals, specifically dogs. It's an instinctual killer instinct. And what I realized at 43, what I've really been doing for 28 years is activating this drive in people, right? And I didn't know how to say it. Right? And I came across this concept of prey drive. And so I see these different activators of prey drive: competition, fear of loss, environment, exposure, embarrassment. When you see these big time people that do this for a living every day, and you hear a lot about when it becomes a pro, it's a job, you know, it's no longer your passion. It's right. Yeah. You're expected to perform. What do you see is typically the big activators of prey drive for the big people? That's question number one. Is it winning? Is it fear of losing? Is it right? Is it hating losing more than they do winning, which I know you talk about in your book? Yeah. Is it, you know, because I think this is what people want to know. Inside the mind of big time people. Your book is about habits of champions. Like this is how the biggest freaking people in the world think. What would you say is the activators of the prey drive for them?
They hate to lose. It's as clear as that. They hate to lose, right? You go to a room, you speak to your room. Everyone says, hey, does everyone would you love to win? Every hand would go up. Nobody says, no, I want to lose, right? But you hate to lose. And a lot of the big time players, they've come from hardship. They've come from tough situations, and they play with a chip on their shoulder. Some guys show the chip, other guys don't. But like a guy like Derek Jeter, he plays with a chip on his shoulder. He played with a chip on his shoulder. He's doing business now with a chip on his shoulder. Hey, I'm going to go run them. What's the worst team in the league? Oh, the Marlins? Okay, that's the one I want to buy. And I want to take that team from the bottom to the top. Nice. And I'm going to get the best talent around in terms of, you know, front office and players to help me do that. And it's going to take a little time, but we're going to sit there and we're going to chop that tree every day until that sucker falls. So it's definitely a hate to lose mentality. And what's great about that is you don't need motivation because it's in you. It's like a fire that just keeps burning. You have to harness it at times, obviously.
So thinking about that, to your point, and I want to come back to when it becomes a job and they have to reactivate that drive every day. Because just like in anything else, you see players become complacent, right? You see them move through cycles. I had a friend tell me once, you know, your life is going to move through this cycle. He actually told me your marriage is going to move through this cycle. So it's going to start with passion, right? Then it's going to feel like a duty some days. Then some days it's going to feel like a burden, and then it's going to come back to commitment. And when you get back to the commitment cycle is when you understand what you're doing, right? But it's going to go through every one of those cycles. I would have to imagine that these big time athletes and you coming in every day, it went through every one of those cycles. So what did you do to reactivate your drive if you ever started getting comfortable, complacent, static, whatever? And I can't assume that you know, we all go through this. There's days I wake up now after 28 years of coaching, go, man, I gotta muscle up my energy today, man. I don't have my A game on. What do you do in those situations?
You know, for me, it was a series of it was thought, right? And saying that, hey, you know what? How many people want this gig that I have, right? Here I am in my 20s. I am such an underdog in every sense of the word. Everybody would want this. If you're in my career path, you want this job because we win every year. You get big bonus checks when you win. And, you know, for me, when I got out to the line every night at 7 o'clock on the line, right field, players are doing their sprints, I would literally just every night take a look at my surroundings and remind myself of the opportunity that I had. And that story dates back even further because, you know, my parents were both teachers. I didn't come from a lot of money. And when we used to go to the ball game, my dad used to say, hey, I got us tickets to the ball game. We were under the lights, literally under the lights. And I'd say, Dad, can we get any closer? And he'd say, hey, son, when those rich people leave, then we'll sneak down a little bit later in the game. So every night that I touched the field, it was like, hey, Dad, I got all the way down to the field. So that was something, a little dialogue that I had with myself. And because my life is so and was so routine, every night there's the national anthem. You see players cross their chest. They pray. They tell themselves different things. That national anthem was so much more powerful than just a tribute to our country and those that service it. It was a time for you to just lock in and sort of have that moment for yourself to say, hey, we have an opportunity here. And the other thing is too, I knew that, you know, when I first started in this career, I worked under Joe Torre for some years, but Joe Torre got let go. Yep. And what I realized was if they can let Joe Torre go, they can let anybody go. That's right. And when you coach, whether it's college, youth, pro, there's an hourglass with sand, and it turns over the day you sign your contract. Some days it moves fast, some days it moves slow, and some days it looks like it's not moving. But just realize your life works the same way. Don't waste that sand.
When you think about that, because you talk about Torre in the book, right? And you talk about what you learn, because I think part of really advancing and going pro in life is who you've studied under, who you've mentored under, who you've apprenticed under, like what you were exposed to. And you really talk about that. So I'm sure there's a lot of Joe Torre fans out there going to watch this. What did you learn? What did you learn from him about building culture, about relationship with players? Like you talk about it in the book. Talk a little bit about that.
You build a culture through the relationships in which you have with your players. So he made every player and every person matter. And, you know, I tell this story all the time whenever I talk about Joe. You know, just an example. Again, I'm a young guy starting out in this field, didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. And I saved up and I bought myself an iPod when they first came out. Well, you know, in the clubhouse, it's sort of sacred ground. You could leave your wallet out and nobody will touch it. But somebody stole my iPod in Boston. And Joe caught wind of it. And literally, I'm out on the field stretching. The next day, I go into my locker, and I got the biggest iPod that you could purchase in my locker. He didn't say anything. I was like, who bought this? A buddy of mine, the clubhouse guy, finally told me. But that's the kind of guy he was. If he caught an ear that you weren't doing well, like my grandmother passed away during one of the seasons, he just came by and sort of swooped me up and brought me in his office. But it was sort of that grandfather type mentality. Yeah. He wasn't like intense. Some leaders are intense. Like I worked under Joe Girardi. He's very intense.
Right.
Joe wanted to win, but he knew that he had to get you to feel really good about yourself and calm so that you could play at your best. And Mariano Rivera tells a great story about that. He said, when I first came in the league, I had talent, but I was so afraid of going back to the minor leagues that Joe Torre called me in his office and said, Mo, you're my guy. Through thick and thin, you're my guy. We're not sending you down. Yeah. And he said, when Joe told me that, everything changed for me. I was finally able to just let my talent take over for the first time and not have to fight. Now, it was kind of interesting.
Now, when you see the managers, you know, when you see the managers get excited and come out and get in the arguments with the umpires, and, you know, it makes for great theater, right? Or are they just so passionate that they get fighting mad, or is it they feel like their team has been done wrong, or is it a thunderbolt for the team? I know when I was a basketball coach, sometimes, you know, I got ejected just to get my team excited, or sometimes, you know, I had a beef with one particular referee that man, every time I saw that guy, I was like, we don't like each other at all. Like we even look at each other the wrong way. There's going to be a problem. Give us insight into that.
Yeah, you know, I think there's a little bit of all of that, but I will say, because, you know, at that level, you play for money, even the manager, right? So you have to win. These games are really important. And when you realize that a game is important, you realize that every at-bat is really important. Right. So if you're going to give away an at-bat or not go to bat for your players, you're going to lose your players. And if you lose your players, you lose your team. And if you lose your team, you lose your job. And that's sort of always stayed at the forefront. And you can't forget this. These are competitive men that are playing a sport that they want to dominate. They're not just looking to be a good little player. Hey, yeah, no, I had a nice day today. They're playing to win, man. Like
Yeah.
it's war. I mean, it is a testosterone-driven environment where a guy will hold you up against the locker if you're not doing what you're supposed to do. And then you'll have lunch with him an hour later.
Right.
So it's a very open environment for communication. Yeah. And it's competitive. I mean, we literally have a team meeting in the beginning of the year that says, what are we going to do this year? And there's one goal, win a championship. That's it. It's very singular.
Yeah, that's good.
So
now,
it's fun.
Talk about the strategies. What happens when, there's a couple of things I'm interested in, because we know that teams can become dysfunctional, right? I mean, that's why I wish I'd have written the book, 5 Dysfunctions of Teams. I mean, that because almost every team I've ever worked with or been on had a version of some of those, either absence of trust or fear of conflict or avoidance of accountability. You know, when you're in there and people were not performing in the performance side, but these are big time athletes, what was the psychology of trying to get them to find another gear for you? Like there's probably some that come in, and I've heard, you know, even in NBA, Charles Barkley talked about, you know, when he was lazy in high school, but he played because he was bigger than everybody else. Then he went to college and he played. He went to the worst team in SEC, Auburn, and he played. And then he went to the NBA and he sat on the bench because he weighed 290 pounds. And Moses Malone basically came to him and said, look, there's only 300 players in the NBA. You're not going to play out of shape. You're either going to get in shape or you're going to sit on the bench. Now, which one's going to be, right? Because you're not good enough. So what did you do? What was your tactics and strategy to get people to a higher frequency if they came in and they were underperforming in there with you?
Yeah, so you know what's interesting? Much like the general pop, you got players that are, again, a part of this big machine called professional sports, professional baseball, that have the same lazy tendencies that average people have. Sure. They just have a talent level that's got them there. So for me, you know, what I did was I realized the importance of a relationship early on, much through my training through Joe. Get people to know you, get people to like you, get people to trust you. So with a lot of players, I used to actually go to dinner with them or go to lunch with them outside of the field. So they got to know who I was instead of just a guy walking around with a clipboard or a guy busting their chops to get in there. You know, I built a relationship, number one. And then there were players that, you know, they would come to me and say, hey, dude, listen, training's not really something that I like to do because it makes me tight. It takes away from my performance. And I knew that if a player believed that there's a good chance that it would actually take away from their performance. So my question to them was to meet them halfway. Hey, what is it that makes you feel good? I love to stretch. Okay, cool. Listen, I need you to meet me in here at this time, this day, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to get you on a real good routine like that. And that for me was like, that was the clickbait. Then from there, I started to introduce them to some new things. And I knew if I tried to sell them the whole store on day one, I would lose them. Yeah. So I give them a little bit. I do the same thing with my CEOs that are stressed. Hey, just lay on the table. Let me work with you. Let me get your body right. And then they start to talk, and then they're open to the whole store.
Well, Daniel, let me ask you that, because now you retired from the sports performance business in athletic sports, right? I mean, you, just like me, I retired from athletic coaching at 31. What prompted you to want to get out of that business and not continue in that business? And then what prompted you to want to get into the coaching of CEOs and business people? And is it physical training you're working with CEOs? Is it emotional training? Give us some insight into why you left sports and what you're doing today.
Yeah, so when I left sports, what happened was, you know, I had a good career, but at 34 years old, my last contract was up, and I had to make a choice. Do I want to stay with stay in professional sports, or do I want to go do something else? And I had done it during my roaring 20s, and I wanted to see what else was out there. I knew that the position I had, I could only go so high, and I knew that in my career path, I was the highest that I can go. I couldn't go any higher. And, you know, like any young, hungry, entrepreneurial person, I was excited. So actually, my last few years with the team, I built out training facilities in New York. I had 5 of them. And I said, you know what? I want to give this entrepreneurial thing a shot, running these brick and mortar facilities. And I very quickly realized that I did not like to do that because I was spending more time driving between the facilities, making sure there was enough toilet paper in the bathroom, and I wasn't doing enough coaching.
Right.
So I closed and sold that. And in my journey, like my final years with the team, when the team would take batting practice, you know, you can sit on the shell like this and watch the guys hit. But for me, I would always go and talk to these VIPs that had field access. You know, they were the privileged group and they ran very successful businesses. And one day I had a guy come up to me and say, hey, coach, you know, what does Derek Jeter do to help him sleep and better his performance? And we started talking, and he said, let me ask you a question. Do you work with old rich Jewish guys? And I said, well, it depends how much they're paying. And he said, I'm serious. And he ended up giving me a call. He ended up being the team owner of an NBA team, multi-billionaire. And that's how my career working with business pros kicked off. So I work with them really to keep them right in terms of their energy, their attitude, their excitement and passion for what they do. And I work with some really talented people. So in terms of tactics, I'm not going to give them the tactics. That's more on your side, but I'm going to make them ready to play, much like my players. I got to get you ready for 7:05 during the week and I'm 1:05 on the weekend.
Yeah. And
I wanted my people to be ready to play. So I found the most competitive fields, right? CEOs run big companies. You know, they have to report earnings. They have to, you know, build their company for investment. So that's the type of person that I work with.
Yeah, and I think see, to me, that almost sums up everything we've talked about today, which is, you know, your book, Habits of a Champion. You know, nobody becomes a champion by accident. And I mean, I think the last thing you said is so good, because if you're going to go pro, it doesn't matter if you're a CEO, if you're a sales professional, if you're a sports, like you need people coaching you. Right? And you understand the importance of the body tied to confidence, the body tied to the mind, the body tied to the heart. And so I'm glad that you said that, because I want people out there to understand the importance of a coach in their life. Yeah. I can't tell you how many people I talk to in a day, and they don't get it, man. They don't get why you need a freaking coach.
It's true.
They don't understand, you know, if you're a CEO and you're handling the stress and pressure of earnings and running a business and doing it, you need a guy like Dana in your life, helping you get everything together personally, helping you get your body together, helping you get it together. You need a guy like me in your life, helping you to work the system and the structures and build your people every day. So it shocks me to, you know, and I think you got to almost do something as big as you have done, which has been part of a World Series. I mean, I think that's one of the best things you have going for you is your early start. You've done it at the highest level. You've worked with the biggest people. You got this great resume. You've written a book on it. I mean, you know, and there's going to be people out there who watch this and go, yes, right, man, I need a guy like that in my life. So let's finish with this, big guy. And thank you for doing this. I'm a big fan of
yours. Thanks for having me.
And you got, I know there's probably going to be something you and I need to do together at some point, because there's people that I know that will need you. There's people that you know that need me. And, you know, you mentioned this concept about the team, and I want to finish on this concept of when you assemble talent assembled without chemistry, without trust, without buy-in underperforms, right? But you first have to assemble talent. And I think in the business world, people don't understand that. Like you can't win championships in the business world with average people.
Yeah.
You can't win. So talk a little bit about the assembling of talent and then putting all that talent together. Like you mentioned, you had these world-class people around you. You wanted the best coaches, the best strength coaches, the best performance people, the best facilities. Talk a little bit about that and the importance of that toward winning the whole thing.
I think the biggest thing is you have to be able to recognize talent, right? So in sports, we have these scouting reports, which are really cool. So you can look at somebody and say, hey, strong here, weak here, strong here, weak here. Right. How many companies actually do that for their people? Do you have a scouting report on your people? And don't forget this, even if you do, people are dynamic. So they're constantly changing. And that doesn't mean they're always changing for the better. So you may have a player on your team that's great right now, but sometimes too, people start doing really well and they've never experienced success before. So what happens? They become about me and I, and look what I could do. And they go like this to the team, and that's not good. So you have to always be, especially I'm talking from a leader perspective, you always have to be evaluating the talent that's on your team. And it has to go beyond how much does somebody sell or you know, how good, you know, how much money do they make us? And that's the seductive part. Because sometimes if you're in business and you have that horse, you're like, how long should we keep him?
Yep.
And it's like, listen, man, if he's hurting everybody else or she's hurting everyone else, I don't care how much he's making your company, he's got to go. And that takes a confident leader to be able to do that. But you have to have an active scouting report on all of your people going at all times. And some people call it an annual review, but you actually have to have metrics that you use. And they could be proprietary to you, or the metrics that are most important in your company that you're using to determine somebody's value for your company. Now, here's the other side. As a leader, you have to do that for yourself. Who's in your camp? Who are the coaches? Who are the people that are helping you be great every single day? And when you get yourself right and you get that team right, you'll feel it. I'm writing a new book called Habits of a Champion Team. And it says when a team can reach the point where they have lift, sort of like that Cinderella team that you see every March, except for this year, that team lifts up and there's like something magical underneath you. And there's companies that feel it. You know, a buddy of mine started Under Armour, and for the first 20 years of their business, they were screaming, doing amazing things, just building that lift and momentum. But they had everybody on that bus was all headed in the right direction, and they were excited about where they were going. And that's what I feel. If you have a team that your culture sucks, look in the mirror. It's probably you and the team that you assembled. And when you get that team right, it's an amazing feeling to win. And I'm a big believer in talking about winning.
Yeah.
Winning is a word that, well, we don't use it as much anymore. But you have to play to win. Business is the most competitive sport in the world, and you better be ready to play.
Well, I want to thank you, man. I've really enjoyed this.
Thank you.
And one of the things you've kind of reinvigorated in me is this building talent, developing talent, you know, the need for coaching in people's lives and how a good coach can take you to a place, and why the best in the world have coaches. You know, I think that's one thing that people watching this need to understand. If you want to be the best in the world, you got to have somebody coaching you.
And you have to be coachable.
And you have to be coachable. So Dana Cavalier, I want to thank you. The book is Habits of a Champion. Nobody becomes a champion by accident, and that's for sure. You don't wake up and be a champion, guys. It's long obedience in the same direction. It's building these habits. Get a copy of this book. And Dana, I look forward to spending some more time with you offline and potentially doing something with you in the future, big guy.
Looking forward to it. Thanks,
this is
Coach.
good. You guys have a great day. Coach Michael Burt. Everybody needs a coach in life. This has been a new version of Person of Interest, the book Habits of a Champion, World Series champion performance coach, Dana Cavalier. And thank you guys for joining us, and I appreciate you. And go out there and go pro, man. Leave your amateur desires behind and go pro. I'm Coach Michael Burt, and the #1 book that I've written over the last couple of years that could help you during these unusual times is a book I wrote called Inside the Mind of a Monster. Now, I want to give you that book. All you have to do is text 678-506-7543, because when you text that in, I'm going to give you a copy of my book, Inside the Mind of a Monster, and it's going to show you the habits and mindsets of top producers and how they attack every single day versus play defense. Don't you want to play offense? Get this book. I'm giving it to you, and I'm telling you, I'm going to turn you into a legendary creature.